Hey everyone, a while ago I tried a no guns challenge run in XCOM 2, and ever since I did that I've wanted to try the same thing in Phoenix Point. So of course, that's what we're doing today. We'll quickly cover the rules and then we'll jump into it. We're playing on veteran difficulty, we're using honest man rules, which means we only reload in the events of misclicks and glitches, and of course, we cannot fire any guns in combat. Now, first things first, yes, I am only playing on veteran, not hero. I've never actually finished Phoenix Point normally, so I didn't want to jump straight into the higher difficulty. Plus, this game kind of sucks on higher difficulties, so I'm not sure I'll ever want to do that. Now, for the final rule, we are allowed to use guns for melee bash attacks. We're just not allowed to fire the guns. Now, I'm using the same definition of a gun as the XCOM 2 run, and when I played that one, I might have went a bit overboard by banning things like grappling hooks. Not that this game has grappling hooks, so I guess it's a moot point now. Anyway, let's just get into it. So if you're unfamiliar with Phoenix Point, I'll provide a very, very brief overview. It was made by the guy who created the original XCOM back in the 90s, and is fairly similar to the XCOM format that we would expect. We manage both a strategic layer as well as a tactical layer, where we engage in turn-based battles to slaughter alien monstrosities. Now, the run is up in full on my archive channel, so if you want more detail about the game's mechanics and lore, maybe watch the first stream. If you've got like a spare 6 hours, I do talk about some of that stuff there, so you'll get a greater understanding. The link is in the description. For this video though, we're focusing on the challenge run itself, so let's get into it. And there's a few key differences with this game from XCOM 2. One is that there are no rookies. Every soldier starts off with a designated class and a corresponding skill tree. Additionally, if we skip the tutorial, which is what I've done, the game actually begins on the strategic layer. No garbage gatecrasher mission that we have to play through, and that is something I really like. And because we start on the strategic layer, it makes restarting the campaign super quick if we don't like our starting barracks. So I did restart a few times off stream until I was happy with the starting team. Every soldier has their regular skill tree like you'd expect, and they also get a few bonus extra abilities that are randomized, just like in XCOM War of the Chosen. And for this run in particular, I'm only looking for a single ability amongst the extra ones: Close Quarters Specialist. This allows the soldier to wield a melee weapon and receive 20% extra damage when using it. Now, normally each class is only proficient with certain weapons, so for example, only snipers can use the sniper rifle, but with the Close Quarters Specialist ability, anyone can use a melee weapon. And on this one, I've been quite lucky. It didn't even take that many reloads to get it, but most of the team have picked it up. The sooner we can equip proper melee weapons, the easier our lives are going to be. I should also mention here, I do have 2 mods installed for this run. One removes several cutscenes and loading screens just to make things go a bit faster, and the second one gives us the tutorial characters without having to actually play the tutorial. Now, it does change Jacob from an assault to a sniper, so I guess I'm changing the vanilla experience. However, for this particular run, snipers are actually the worst of the 3 base classes. So this change actually makes things more difficult for us. So first things first, since we won't be using ammo for our guns, I immediately sell just about all of it. This will actually give us a nice bonus to supplies in the beginning. So in a weird way, not using guns kind of gives us an advantage. Also, a lot of disadvantages, of course. Now, I am using all the DLCs for this game, including the promotional skins. And these things give us some nice strats that we otherwise wouldn't have access to at the beginning of the game. See, unlike weapons, any class can equip any armor and gain most of its benefits. So for example, we can slap some Berserker pants on our slow-moving heavy, and that's going to increase his speed. And sure, he may look like a complete clown with his giant body and tiny little legs, but this is a matter of function over fashion. But there's something even better than this, and that's giving Jacob the Priest Helmet. This not only buffs his will, which we need to use most special abilities, it also gives him access to the Frenzy skill. Normally only the Priest can use this ability, but we've got super early access to it here. Now as we deploy on the battlefield for the first time, it's actually the first mission from the Chaos Engine DLC. Now the idea of this DLC is that there's this eccentric inventor by the name of the Maker, and he sends us out on a bunch of missions to secure different vehicles that he wants to tinker with. In exchange for doing this, he'll offer a steeper and steeper discount on the goods that he sells at his store after each mission we complete. Now, I'm not really planning on using his shop, and we don't actually get to keep the vehicles that we find for him. The main reason we're doing these missions is for XP. It gives us a whole bunch of deployments early on, and that allows our team to level up much faster than would otherwise be possible. And as this one begins, you can see how Frenzy works. When Jacob activates the ability, all allies within a 20 tile radius get a 50% increase to their speed. It lasts, I think, 2 turns, maybe 3, and it allows our squad to cover much more ground than they would normally be able to. In pretty much every single mission with this team, that's the first thing I'm always going to be doing. Activating Frenzy with Jacob. Now the main enemies of the game are the Pandorans, and they actually also start off without guns. The difference is their melee attacks are going to do a lot more damage than ours. We begin by making our way onto the top of a building, and as we do this, one problem becomes immediately apparent. And that's that Frenzy doesn't actually affect Jacob himself, only his allies, so he's noticeably slower than the rest of the team. This means he's going to have trouble keeping up with the front line, so he's probably going to be mostly a support unit. Now we move in on a Pandoran Triton, and Irina can use a bash attack with her gun, and you can see here it inflicts pretty pathetic damage. So this is why we want soldiers who can wield actual melee weapons. They will do much more damage than our trash bash attack. And the reason that we're using bash is because any soldier can use it. It doesn't matter if they're proficient with melee weapons or not. And even though the damage is low, there is an upside. It only requires 1 action point to attack, and our troops actually have 4 actions per turn. So it's quite common that we can move and still attack 2 or 3 times. Now another enemy type is the Mind Fragger. These little things will jump on our soldiers' faces and take control of them. Now the best counter I've found to this is just to stand our units side by side. Yeah, it may not sound like much, but it comes in really useful. See, the way we remove a Mind Fragger is by using the bash attack. In a regular run, that's the main reason why you would use the bash attack. It gets rid of the Mind Fragger without damaging your soldier. So as long as we keep the teams side by side and we're able to reach each other and use the bash, we should be fine from the Mind Fraggers. So we push on and we secure the vehicle known as a Scarab, and we can actually drive it around the battlefield. Now it does have missiles, but we're counting those as guns, so we can't use them. However, the Scarab is fast, so what we can do is pile our soldiers into it and then just speed away to the evac zone. And just like that, the first mission has gone really well. The second mission is a scavenging one. This has nothing to do with the DLC. There's a bunch of crates on the map that we want to go and grab and then evac out. So it's very similar to the loot crate supply raids in XCOM 2. And you know how I just went on that rant about the best defense against Mind Fraggers being to cluster our troops together? Well, in this mission, of course I do the exact opposite. There's this one supply crate out on its own. Omar is our heavy, he's got the jet jump ability, so I use his rocket to reach the box. The problem is, this means leaving all the other soldiers who don't have rockets behind. And of course, he gets snatched by a mindfragger. So I move in a couple of other troops to try and reach him to remove the threat. However, it turns out a bunch of other Pandorans are keeping Omar company, and they descend upon Takeshi, cutting him down. So second mission in, and we've already lost a soldier. Now, I knew moving Omar out there on his own was super risky, but what can I say? My greed was just massively strong. So here I decide to restart the campaign. Getting new soldiers is quite difficult in the early game, so I'd really rather avoid losing anyone. This was only the second mission, so it's not like we've lost too much progress. So take 2, and the first mission is once again the Chaos Engine DLC one. Now, I make sure to follow my own advice this time, and I keep Omar and Sophia the Assault right next to each other as a defense against the Mindfraggers. So imagine the joy I feel when 2 Mindfraggers attack us and take control of both soldiers. And yeah, this was a bit funny, but we do actually get a little lucky here. See, there is a third fragger that's quite nearby, but for whatever reason, it just chooses not to do anything. So yeah, 2 soldiers mind-controlled on the first mission is not ideal, but it actually could have been worse. Anyway, Irina, our sniper, is still close enough to get off a bash attack on both the fraggers, which gives us back access to our soldiers. But yeah, these mindfraggers are proving to be quite annoying. Now once they're gone, we do have an Arthron that's moving in on us. Now we're running out of attacks for the turn, so I decide I'm gonna unleash the secret weapon, a grenade. Now the rules for these are the same as my XCOM run. We can use grenades as long as we throw them by hand. That's not a gun. However, the grenade launcher is banned. And while grenades are quite powerful in the early game, we have to rebuild them to replace them after use. We don't just have an infinite amount of these things. The more of them we use, the more supplies it's going to cost us. And for this reason, grenades are a last resort weapon. I'm only going to be using them when I really need to. But yeah, they sure do help us here. And once again, we're able to capture the Scarab and be on our way. Nothing too difficult. And once again, the second mission is also a supply raid. And this time I split the team into 1 trio and 1 pair. I'm not leaving anyone on their own this time. But, like clockwork, 3 out of our 5 soldiers get grabbed by a mindfragger, all on the same turn. These things normally aren't this annoying, but they're being relentless in this run. I'm not sure what the deal is. Anyway, while losing 3 soldiers is bad, we still have control of 2 of them, and that's enough to save the rest of the group from the mindfraggers. And we actually end up grabbing all the supplies and then evacing out safely. And I think what made this mission easier than the last go around is that the crates spawned much closer to our starting point. And like I said, I made sure not to leave anyone out on their own. So we've made it past the second mission. That's progress. And I suppose I should discuss the strategic layer too. The first faction we discover is Cedriion, but I decide to hold off on doing their first mission. I did some playtesting with this run, and I did struggle with the first Cedriion encounter, so we're going to come back to this later. Then once the Phoenix Archives research completes, we can start activating additional bases around the globe. And with the Festering Skies DLC, when you play on Veteran difficulty, 2 of these bases will actually start with Manticores already constructed. Manticores being this game's equivalent of the Sky Ranger. And this is actually huge. Building additional air vehicles to house more squads is a big investment, both of your supplies and your manufacturing time. So while I think Festering Skies overall does make the game more challenging, it certainly gives us a nice bonus here in the early game. Now when we activate a new base, the first thing we want to do is start building a satellite if there's not one already installed. And as a super brief explanation, satellites essentially allow us to travel further across the globe so we can reach new areas and new missions. I also opt to start spamming as many research labs and manufacturing plants as we can. Labs will increase our research speed, as you'd probably expect. The plants will allow us to build items more quickly, and ideally I'm aiming for about 6 of each. We soon meet another faction in New Jericho, and I am gonna play their first mission immediately. Our objective is to eliminate 3 rogue New Jericho soldiers. And the main thing that I think can catch new players off guard with this one is that all the soldiers have return fire, meaning that when we shoot at them, they will automatically fire back at us as a free action. But the thing about return fire is that it doesn't trigger on melee attacks or grenades, so that certainly works in our favour. What also works in our favour is that we've obtained enough skill points to give Sophia the Close Quarters Specialist ability. And thanks to those promotional skins, we actually start with an axe that we can give her. Now I thought the promotional skins also provided a machete type of weapon, but I either couldn't find it in our inventory, or I just imagined its existence in the first place and I'm losing my mind. Anyway, long story short, we only have one melee weapon in the axe for the moment. And check out the damage she inflicts with this thing. She can nearly one-shot one of these New Jericho goons. So yeah, you can see here this is much better than our crummy bash attacks that everyone else is still using. The trade-off is that a melee strike uses 2 action points instead of the bash's 1. However, even with that, the increased damage means it's still a net positive for us. Mission accomplished, a good victory here. Next up, it's time for the second Chaos Engine DLC mission. This time we're stealing an armadillo from New Jericho. Now this one can be difficult. For whatever reason, the Pandorans are on a higher power level than what they should be. And basically that means they're wielding guns, even though they shouldn't have access to that technology just yet. And as if that's not bad enough, the New Jericho forces here are also hostile to us. Since we're stealing their vehicle, it's understandable. These guys have guns too, heavy cannons and sniper rifles in fact. So I've been holding off on this mission until we had at least one assault trooper with the dash ability, which Sophia now has. This allows our assaults to move further than they'd normally be able to. Now ideally I would have liked both of our assaults to have it, but Takeshi is just leveling up way too slowly. So Sophia's going to have to do this one on her own. We make a beeline for the console to activate the vehicle, and I'm just ignoring all the enemies we see on the way. We're just going to stay in cover as best we can and hope the Pandorans and the Jericho forces decide to target each other instead of us. And with Frenzy plus Dash, Sophia can actually reach the console to activate the armadillo in 2 turns. It's actually insane how much distance a soldier can cover in this game if you give them the right build. Now meanwhile, Omar is using his jetpack to reach the armadillo at a similarly fast pace. Now once he's there, he can climb in, and inside he's safe from any outside attacks, unless the armadillo gets destroyed, in which case he's going straight to the Shadow Realm. But just like the Scarab, the armadillo is really fast, so we can zip over to the remaining troops and pick them up too. Then we just drive to the evac zone, and we actually beat this one without making a single attack. Maybe a pacifist run is in the works one day. Not today though. The third Chaos Engine mission sees us recovering an Aspida from an abandoned Cedriion Haven. And on this one, the Pandorans are back to their usual strength level, which is a bit weird, but it's good for us, no guns to worry about. Now, I have played this mission probably half a dozen times at least, and I always use the exact same strat. I just have a heavy jet jump over to the console to activate the Aspida. Then I have another soldier pilot the vehicle to the evac zone. It's brilliant. Every single time I've done this, the plan has worked perfectly. But not this time. Guess what happens this time after we jet jump with Omar? Yeah, a mind fragger. What else? These things are seriously out of control in this run. So Jacob and Sophia have to go after our boy to try and remove the fragger, while also avoiding him attacking them. Now this leaves Irina and Takeshi just kind of hanging out by the Aspida. They don't really have anything to do. We cannot activate the vehicle until we've access to the console. Now Pandorans are coming for the duo, and the main strat that I'm using here is just to pull back a bit when we see the monstrosities coming for us. We're going to force the Pandorans to move in towards us so that on our turn we can get in
close range
and land our melee attacks. Meanwhile, we are able to take back Omar from the Mindfragger, and Sophia ends up activating the console. So it did go a bit sideways, but we've recovered, we're ready to finish this mission. And when we activate the Aspida, this thing is pretty good. It has these tentacle arms, which means we can actually attack with it. Yeah, this weird hover vehicle is using melee attacks. I think it can have a gun, but this one doesn't. And check this out, these arms can do 40 paralysis damage, and that is big in the early game. And the first time I streamed Phoenix Point, I didn't really understand how paralysis works. Essentially, once we max out paralysis on a unit, they'll lose all their action points. And this is how we capture aliens alive in this game. Now the downside with the Aspida is that, barring any upgrades you get for it, it can only house one soldier inside. So it looks like Takeshi has a long run to the evac zone. But yeah, despite the Mindfragger setback, we pull this one off without too much issue. Shortly after, we discover our first haven for the Disciples of Anu, the third and final faction that we can ally with. And these are the guys I've been waiting for. Not because of the first mission, it's pretty unremarkable. We're just fighting a bunch of worms, and the worms are really slow. So it's normally pretty easy to run in, attack one of them, and then fall back to be safe from the others. It's kind of a slaughter. There's not really much to say here. No, see, the reason I've been waiting for these guys is that the Disciples have access to the Berserker class. We want to add one of them to our ranks as quickly as possible. So I'm going to keep my eyes open for a haven that has a Berserker available for recruitment. In the meantime though, we're actually going to deploy on the first story mission. Now, I won't go into details, but the basic premise of this game is that Randolph Symes, the leader of the Phoenix Project, he left on a quest to find a cure to the Pandora virus. Now, sadly, he never returned. So we're basically retracing his steps to see if we can find him, or at the very least, finish what he started. Now, the objective on this particular deployment is to both recover Symes' notes on the virus, as well as eliminating all the Pandorans at the site. The notes are on the roof, so we jump up there with Omar, and I send Takeshi as backup in the case of Mindfraggers. Then we just wait around the building and allow the Pandorans to come to us. They still don't have guns at this stage, so we don't have to worry about them sniping us. I will also say here that Omar has unlocked the War Cry ability. Now this reduces the action points of any enemies caught in the radius from 4 down to 2. Now given a lot of attacks take 2 actions to perform, and many of the really powerful abilities by bigger enemies can take 3 action points, War Cry is an amazing skill. With weaker enemies, it usually forces them to choose between moving and attacking, and very often they will choose to move. And as for the more powerful enemies, it can often shut down their most devastating attacks completely. War Cry is an incredible skill. And yeah, having War Cry this early, the extra XP from those Chaos Engine missions is certainly helping us out. And we win this one pretty easily. There are quite a few enemies, but yeah, we take care of them. After that, it's our first Haven defense mission. The Pandorans are attacking a new Jericho installation, so we're on the scene to help out. And as you can tell, sometimes we'll be working with the factions, sometimes we'll be working against them. Just depends on the circumstance. Now, Jericho does have their own soldiers on this mission. They're allied with us against the Pandorans, and if we move next to them, we can actually take direct control of the unit. And as far as this goes for the rules of our run, if the faction soldiers are under AI control, they can fire their gun as much as they like. We're not the ones doing that, so it doesn't count. However, once the unit comes under player control, we're then prohibited from firing their gun. And so this does leave us with a bit of a conundrum. On one hand, if we leave the units under the game's control, they can use their guns, and that's probably going to make them more powerful than bash attacks. Conversely, the faction AI is pretty horrible, and the soldiers will often get themselves shadow-realmed very quickly. Plus, if we activate them during the mission, there's a chance they'll permanently join our barracks after the fight is over. So definitely pros and cons to consider either way. And in fact, you can see the terrible AI in play right here. This Jericho Heavy quickly finds herself surrounded by 3 Arthrons, and we can't even grenade all of them without hitting the Heavy herself as well. So very bad deployment there. We can use the grenade to hit 2 out of 3, and that's not too bad. And once again, we claim the victory. And the best part about this one is the attack has revealed the Pandoran's nearby nest. That's essentially where they launched the attack from. So they hit a human base, we can now go and hit one of theirs. And destroying a nest will provide us access to some valuable research, so we are making a beeline straight for it. Now, the nest missions can be annoying. They house 2 hatching sentinels, and our job is to destroy both of them. Once the sentinels become aware of our presence, they'll try a mass hatch attack, which causes all nearby Pandoran eggs to hatch, as you might expect. And from the eggs usually come mind fraggers or worms. But that's not really the bad part. The thing that makes these missions irritating is often just finding the sentinels. The maps are a tunnel maze, often with very tight corridors. Enemies can easily be waiting for us around corners. And just actually working out where the sentinels are and where we need to go, it can become a really time-consuming process. And of course, enemy reinforcements are regularly spawning in, so the longer we take, the more Pandorans we're going to have to deal with. And I have to say, the bash attack did catch me off guard here with just how terrible it is on the sentinels. Omar is doing okay damage since heavies have an ability that increase melee damage by 50%. Plus, I think the heavier the gun is, the more bash damage it does. So he's not too bad, but the other units, it's pretty abysmal. At least Sophia still has her axe, and she's doing good damage there, so that's something. Now, on top of the low damage, there's another issue with the bash attack. It actually does damage to the weapon we're bashing with. And once the weapon takes enough damage, it's destroyed. And that actually happens to Irina here. So we really need an alternative to the bash in the near future. But despite some problems, we are still victorious, and with the nest gone, we gain access to the Pandoran colony research, which I'm going to make a priority. And the other thing that happens here is the Pandorans gain some new mutations, and they can now wield guns. So it's no longer an even playing field. Things may start to get more difficult from here on out. Before that though, we finally find a Berserker for hire, so we've obtained a new recruit. Now the Berserker class starts out with melee weapon specialization, which is good in of itself, but honestly, I'm not interested in Rookie McRookface as a soldier right now. You see, the reason I wanted to recruit a Berserker is for the weapon he has, a Maddox Fist, aka a giant hammer. A melee weapon. Now we can reverse engineer this thing, and that will destroy the item, but once the research is complete, we'll be able to build as many hammers as we want. So that means we can give them to all the troops with melee proficiency, and that's going to be a lot more powerful than using bash attacks. And in case you're wondering, no, we cannot reverse engineer the axe. Promotional skin items cannot be used for that purpose. Just thought I'd mention that. While that's going on, it's time for the final mission of the Chaos Engine DLC. And here, we're recovering the Maker's Chaos Buggy. And yeah, I really should have done this one early. I messed up by leaving it until now. It would have been a much easier deployment if the Pandorans still only had melee weapons. Now, Rookie doesn't have his hammer because we've taken it for research, so he's just using a bash attack. He's not going to be that helpful, and Takeshi is quickly mind-fragged while Sophia gets jumped by 2 Tritons and takes immense damage. Now, I do my best to shut down the enemies with Warcry, but there's this Arthron who I thought was inside the radius, but it's actually not. So Sophia takes even more damage and we come stupidly close to losing her. I genuinely thought she was gone, but she hangs on with a mere pittance of HP. Definitely the closest call we've had since starting the second attempt. And honestly, it's not just the guns that are the problem. The Pandorans' HP count is increasing as well. So they're doing more damage with ranged attacks now, while relatively we're doing less damage than what we were with our bash attacks. And we just get totally swarmed. I end up just jumping in the buggy with Sophia and having everyone else dash back to the evac as quickly as possible. Just like the Aspida, the buggy only has room for 1 soldier. And we are able to survive this one, but barely. This is looking bad. We really need an increase in power level. And fortunately, I think that may be on the horizon. See, a few things are going to be game changers for us. Firstly, some of the troops are reaching level 4. Now, the maximum is 7, but level 4 in particular is useful since it allows us to add a second class. Yeah, these troops can actually combo in 2 classes and gain access to the abilities of both. With Sophia, Takeshi, and Omar, we're gonna go with a heavy assault combo. The dash ability from the assault tree is really helpful for getting into
close range.
And the extra 50% melee damage from the heavy tree is really useful as well. And I think it does stack with the 20% from Close Quarter Specialist to give us plus 70% damage total. Now for Jacob, I'm opting to go with the Heavy for his second class. 1, because more uses of Warcry is always good. But more importantly, being a Heavy will give Jacob access to melee weapons. I think he's the only soldier of our starting crew who didn't start with Close Quarter Specialist, so he really needs that melee proficiency. It'll also give him access to the jetpack. Now, given he's never frenzied and he's often quite a bit slower than the rest of the group, the jetpack may allow him to keep up with the rest of the team a little bit better. And we've got some other developments too. Namely, our first recruit from the Phoenix Point recruitment pool. Think the same thing as the XCOM 2 recruitment pool, and we get super lucky with this guy. Not only is he a heavy, which is a great class for us, he also rolled the Close Quarter Specialist perk. I could not have asked for better. Now Sophia's Manticore is full, so we deploy our new friend Plot Armor to one of the other bases that we activated earlier, which has an empty Manticore waiting for him. Now, we don't really want to send him on any missions alone, as that would probably end very badly. Even despite his name, I don't think he'd be getting out of that alive. But he can still go exploring in the Manticore, finding havens and scanning sites. Now, there is a chance he can get ambushed, but if that happens, I'm hoping he can just use his rocket jump to get to safety until he can evac. Now, Plot Armor quickly discovers another Anu Haven with a Berserker who we can recruit, so we're going to do that, and this one's named Local Mimic. And yes, our new recruits were named by Twitch viewers. But see here, our one-man team is now a 2-person team. That's looking better already. By the time we reach the next story mission, everyone except Takeshi is wielding a hammer. He's still leveling up too slowly, so we haven't been able to cross-class him just yet. And I should mention, Sophia still has her axe. Everyone else has a hammer. Now for this one, we need to secure a dilapidated research station. Problem is, some bandits have moved in, so we're going to have to deal with them if we want access to the site. And this mission can be quite difficult, but it can also be really easy. It just depends on the RNG and where the enemies spawn in. Now I usually take cover around this large rock formation, but the bandits do have a Berserker, and if he notices us, he'll usually throw a grenade onto the whole team, and that really sucks. Now this time we're lucky and he doesn't detect our presence until he's out of action points. He can't throw his grenade now, so on our turn we can easily clobber him with our new hammer collection. After this, I usually head for the first building, and here, once again, if we're unlucky, there can be heavies deployed that can shoot at us before we can reach the cover of the structure. But our good luck continues, and the beefy boys don't even notice us. So we're able to run in with Omar and get off a war cry. Now both the heavies and snipers take 3 action points to fire their weapons, so a single war cry effectively renders them useless. Now there is also an enemy assault. They only need 2 action points to shoot at us. That's still a potential threat, so we're going to target them first. And our hammers are doing gigantic damage compared to the bash attacks from our guns. It is a huge upgrade, and I'm so happy to have this. And then we can really just keep spamming Warcry until all the heavies and snipers are gone. They can't do anything to us. This is quite possibly the easiest this mission has ever been for me. Like even with the sniper, he normally spawns away from the heavies and will hang back just shooting at your troops. But here he decided he was going to join them on the front line, and that made him pretty much useless in the fight. Maybe I have to play this game more often. This is going really well. But as I say that, I guess the thing is that Sophia's squad is the A team. They're the most powerful soldiers, and there's 6 of them. Will things be so easy for Plot Armor's team? Now they are up to 3 by this point. We've had another new Jericho Haven defense, and one of the heavies, Glass Cannon, joined us afterwards. Now normally I would avoid missions when we only have 3 soldiers, especially since they are low level, but this one is a vehicle recovery mission, and these are different from the DLC ones we did. Here we'll actually get to permanently keep the vehicle that we find. Now I meant to leave Mimic on the Manticore, but I forgot to deselect her before deployment, so big brain play there. Now fortunately the evac zone is close to our starting location, so I can just run her there straight away. She's out of the mission, we don't have to worry about her. And the reason I only want to bring the heavies is because of the jet jump ability. These 2 can just leap from rooftop to rooftop, and that's going to go a long way to keeping them safe from Pandoran attacks, especially mind fraggers. They can't reach us if we're this high up. And my usual strategy for these missions is just to ignore the enemies as much as we can, double time it to the vehicle, and then drive our way to freedom. And the plan works flawlessly here, though I did get a chuckle at this. We jump down right next to the armadillo and look at the distance we can move. It's abysmal. We're 1 tile off being able to activate the vehicle this turn. And see, by now I'm just so used to having Frenzy active, I've kind of forgotten how slow heavies normally are. But yeah, no Frenzy on this team, not yet at least. But nonetheless, both our troops are able to safely jump inside the truck and we start speeding out of there. Now the Pandorans will attack the vehicle, but it's very bulky, and after a turn or 2 we will completely outrun them. At that point there's really nothing they can do to stop us. And after the mission, the Armadillo actually joins us in the Manticore. Now it takes up the space of 3 soldiers, and the air vehicle can only hold 6 total. So that's our squad now. Plot Armor, Local Mimic, Glass Cannon, and a massive Armadillo transport. Now we won't keep it this way forever, but for right now this works for us. If our team does get ambushed, the Armadillo will pretty much guarantee their safety. We just pile inside it and outrun the enemies until we can escape. Not long after this, Sophia's team actually has a vehicle raid mission of their own. Now the strat for this one is a little bit different. I send in Jacob, Sophia, and Takeshi. Everyone else is staying on the Manticore. Now Jacob's job is to activate Frenzy and then just rush to the evac. Our pair of assaults can then use their high mobility combined with the dash skill. They can clear massive distances across the map. Now because they're on the ground, we do have to take extra care about the enemies. We do have to eliminate a few bad guys along the way. But Sophia is more than up for the task with her axe. You might also notice I've placed her in the Samnu armor. I think that's how you pronounce it. We obtained that from the first mission of the Living Weapons DLC. I didn't cover the mission since it was pretty uneventful, and I have a feeling this video is gonna be long enough as is. Now the duo reaches the Scarab, and we're gonna do the same thing as always. We race inside the vehicle, and then we begin driving away. Now since the Manticore one is full, we can choose which of the activated bases we want to send the Scarab to. I opt for the one housing the Manticore 3. We place the Scarab and one new recruit on board, named This. Yeah, like the word this. That's his name. Anyway, we send this lone soldier and the vehicle off to explore the surrounding region. Again, if an ambush mission catches this new guy unaware, the Scarab should be able to keep him safe. Now, while I was playtesting this run, the biggest issue I found was that the A team was quite powerful, but the other squads really struggled. So to avoid that happening here, I start loading out one of our bases with training facilities. The more of these facilities that are in a base, the more XP the soldiers stationed there will gain. So we can actually level up troops without sending them into the field. And this base is where we'll be sending pretty much all our new recruits. Leave them there for a while, let them rank up, get some XP, we can get some abilities on them, make them more useful in combat. But I also decided we're going to drop off Plot Armor's team here too, just for a while. We can continue exploring the surrounding area with just the armadillo aboard the Manticore, meanwhile the troops can stay at the base and gain some ranks. Before too long, we're deploying on a Cedriion ally mission, I guess. See, as our friendship with each faction increases, we'll unlock a series of missions that we need to complete for them. Well, I guess we don't actually need to do them, but we do need to do them if we want our relationship to go even higher. Now, we actually did the new Jericho one already, and here we're doing Cedrion's. Now, I haven't covered both missions as they're pretty similar. The objective is just to eliminate all the Pandorans on the map. But the thing with this one is that by now even Takeshi has a hammer, so that's really good. And even better, the team also have access to new razors. And the new razor is essentially this game's equivalent of the arc thrower from XCOM Enemy Unknown. And we can only build it after completing the research that we acquired from destroying our first nest. Hence why we made that mission a priority. I wanted to get these items on our troops as quickly as we could. Now the new razor is a melee weapon that inflicts paralysis damage. Only 8, so it has nothing on the speeder. But the great thing about this weapon is everyone can use it, even if they don't have melee weapon proficiency. Plus, it allows us to capture Pandorans instead of shadow realming them. And later, with the right research, we will be able to harvest live specimens for resources, so it's definitely worth capturing these things when we can. And I've been building multiple containment facilities in the background to increase the amount of aliens we can hold. Another good thing about the new razor is that it only takes 1 action point to attack rather than 2 that our hammers use. So it is a nice backup that we can give all of our troops in addition to their hammers. But doing this Cinerron Loyalty mission actually reminds me that we never did the first Cinerron introduction mission. You know how I said we'd come back to it earlier in the video? Turns out I totally forgot to do that. My plan was to return to the mission once we had hammers, which I mean technically I have done, it just took a bit longer than I planned. And doing it now pretty much makes it a joke. See, the problem with doing this mission early is that our bash attacks weren't doing very much damage, as you know. So if we got into
close range
and were unable to finish the enemy off, well, all these guys have pistols and they can then launch a great deal of attacks. Pistols only use 1 action point as well, or most of them anyway. So if multiple bandits decide to attack the same unit, we could find ourselves losing someone, and that did happen during my playtesting. However, this is not the start of the game. And not only do we have hammers, which do huge amounts of damage compared to our bash attacks, I've also been buffing each person's speed stat this entire time. Now, as you'd probably guess, the speed stat dictates how far a soldier can move per action point, and with Frenzy, our guys can move pretty far. So given these advantages, this mission is pure domination. We just run in, we thump the bad guys with our hammers, and if we need to, we can run back out. But we actually don't need to. I think every single attack we make on this mission is a one-shot. So I guess that's the upside of leaving the beginner mission until later in the game. Now anyway, with this Battle 1, Cedriion shares their AI research with us, and this we want to take straight away. Once complete, it will drastically reduce the time required for all further research. And I'm thinking we could have obtained this much earlier if I hadn't smooth-brained myself and forgot about the mission, but it's not the end of the world. We'll persevere. Not long after this, we then have the next Anu faction quest as well, and this one is a little bit different to the other two. To begin with, we're fighting humans, not Pandorans, a bunch of bandits. And secondly, we're fielding a different team for this expedition. It's Plot Armor and his band of Twitch-named misfits. Now, our biggest issue is that these guys are lower level than Sophia's team. On top of that, they don't have access to the Frenzy ability. Those promotional skins only gave us one helmet that could do that. And yeah, I could micromanage and swap stuff between teams, but I hate doing that, so I never do. And that helmet has been a really big help on so many missions up until now. And so we end up in a bit of a catch-22. Ideally, I'd like to bait the enemies in, which means hiding outside the bandits' line of sight. The problem with doing this is that cover is somewhat limited in the opening areas of this map. So we have to cluster the troops close together. And of course, when you're clustered close together, well, that makes you a prime target for a grenade. Now, thankfully, that's the worst the enemy throws at us, and then it's our turn to respond. And the main strat is just to use Warcry. I know it's pretty simple, but it is extremely effective. It renders the heavies and snipers essentially useless. So for this reason, we're going to target the assault troopers first. Once they're gone, it's pretty much an auto win. As long as we have the will points to keep using Warcry, we are safe from the bad guys. They really can't do anything to us. The next mission though, well, it goes pretty badly. It's another vehicle recovery, and this one we're running only our boy This and his vehicle. Now, sending out a lone soldier this way is probably not generally advised when you're playing this game. However, these vehicle missions are theoretically a good one for him to do. He can jump in the Scarab, drive to the other vehicle, activate it, and then drive back out. No combat necessary, it should be pretty safe. At least it would be if it weren't for the fact that this particular vehicle recovery op is not against Pandorans. Our enemies this time around are the Pure, a bunch of cybernetic monstrosities. And as the mission began and I saw the Pure were fielding multiple technicians, I had a bad feeling. Technicians can wield a submachine gun that only takes one action point to fire, meaning they can shoot a maximum of 4 times per turn. And that amount of firepower honestly makes me nervous. And my worst fears are confirmed as they begin bombarding the Scarab with volley after volley of bullets. And of course, any units inside the vehicle when it's destroyed, well, they also get destroyed as well. So this exits the stage just as quickly as he entered. And just so much about this entire encounter I messed up. The vehicle we're trying to recover is an armadillo, and I had even considered moving this from the Scarab to the new ride precisely because the Scarab had sustained so much damage on the drive over. But I didn't. I left him in the original vehicle. That was a massive mistake. And even on top of that, this didn't even have to be in either vehicle. We could have just left him at the evac zone and let the Scarab go and get the armadillo. So yeah, I made a lot of mistakes here. But the part that annoyed me the most was that even though we do actually get the armadillo out of the mission in one piece, because all the operatives that we deployed got sent to the Shadow Realm, we don't even get to keep the armadillo. It's just mission failure, no rewards for us. That was really annoying. That armadillo made it out safely. It should be ours. But I guess it doesn't matter, we're probably not going to use it for too much anyway. And yeah, the first loss since we restarted the run. Now we have been going pretty well, so hopefully this is just a once-off. Well, next up is another story mission, and the way this one works is the game gives us two missions that are essentially identical. One of them is a fake out, but the other will allow us to progress to a third story mission that's also essentially exactly the same. It's not the most compelling narrative in the world, that's for sure. But yeah, we don't know which of the two missions is the real one until after we complete it. So rest in peace to the speedrunners, I guess. Now by this time we have plenty of alien containment facilities built, and so I'm getting pretty trigger happy with the new races. The resources we'll get from these things are going to be really important later on, so I want as many of these guys as we can get. Now the issue with trying to take them alive is that if we were just trying to take them out with regular melee attacks, we can probably do it in 1 or 2 shots. But with our new razor, it's probably going to take 4 or 5 attacks to fully paralyze, depending on the enemy. And it's going to leave our soldiers vulnerable if we can't shut down the enemies quickly enough. Now, of course, we can continue spamming Warcry to reduce the action points of the Pandorans as well. And I do that here with Omar. Now, I'm thinking where I've placed him along this wall, I don't think the Pandorans will be able to see him. But my folly here is that I'm used to XCOM 2 line of sight, and things actually work a little bit differently in this game. So long story short, the Pandoran with the shotgun can see Omar. Yep, it can see him quite clearly. So just like that, our second loss. And Omar was one of our best troops. He had good abilities, so this was a really disappointing blow. And even worse, while we can recover his weapons and items, we don't actually get his armor back. So that part sucks as well. Now, as for the alien that murked our boy, well, we're not taking that one alive. To ashes with you, scumbag. Now, to avoid this happening again, I invest some skill points into improving our soldiers' strength. This will increase their maximum HP. And I probably should have done it earlier, but I've been focusing on willpower and speed. I think those things are more important in a run like this. And honestly, up until now, we've been dominating, so I was probably getting a little too confident. Well, reality check received loud and clear. Now, Plot Armor did receive the extra 20% melee damage as well, so he's probably going to replace Omar on the A-team at some point. But we don't need to rush into that. For right now, Sophia's team is going to pick up this guy from a Cedriion Haven that we saved. His name is Captain, and he is the rookie of the squad, thus making him Captain the Rookie. That's not confusing at all, right? So with Captain the Rookie along for the ride, I now start focusing on the Legacy of the Ancients DLC missions. These first ones require us to move into an area, steal some schematics for a new weapon, and then evac out. And while all this is going down, enemy reinforcements will continue spawning in. Now the first mission is against bandits, and it's pretty easy. But the second mission, I'm using the B team for this one, this is actually where the real fun is to be had. See, we're not fighting bandits this time, we're going up against Anu, and they have priests who can mind control us, so this could be pretty ugly. So allow me to share with you my strategy. We bring no more than 4 soldiers, since that's how many can fit inside an armadillo, and we just race to the schematics inside the vehicle. Now, when a soldier exits a vehicle, they only have, I think, 2 action points available. But Mimic, using Dash, can run in and grab the schematics with 1 action, then they can run back to the armadillo and jump back inside with their 2nd action. So we exit, grab the schematics, we're back inside the safety of the vehicle, all before Anu can do anything. And even though she's a Berserker, she has the dash ability since I've cross-classed her as an assault as well. Then we just start driving back to the evac zone. We completely ignore the Anu units. And the great thing is, when we're inside a vehicle, we cannot be mind controlled. So this mission is over in a mere 3 turns. And we didn't even have Frenzy. This was so good. Before long, it's another vehicle recovery mission, and this one actually gives us an speeder, and it even has the arms attachment so we can attack with it. And 40 paralysis damage in one hit is a heck of a lot better than our 8 damage with the new Razor. So definitely the best vehicle we've picked up. The other ones, the only thing we can use them for is rapid transport across the battlefield. This one we can actually use in combat to support the troops if we want to. Now the downside to vehicles is, like I said, you're giving up 3 soldier spaces to use them, but even so there may be some scenarios where it's good to have a speeder. We'll just have to wait and see. Now we soon have some new recruits available, and because we've been researching additional classes, well, our recruits are no longer just made up of the 3 base classes anymore. Like here, we have 2 priests that we can hire. Now, ideally, I would love either a priest or a technician with the close quarters specialist perk. So I'm gonna be keeping an eye out for that. But for right now, even though these priests don't have that particular ability, I'm still gonna recruit them. Once every team has a priest, everyone will be able to use the frenzy strat on every mission, and I'm thinking that could be really helpful. In the meantime, we reached the 3rd of the 3 identical story missions, and I've learned my lesson this time. We do still want to capture aliens, but I can't be too greedy. So initially, we're just sending them to the Shadow Realm. We do way more damage to their HP with our regular strike attacks than we do with the new Razor, and we can defeat most of these things in 1 or 2 hits. Once the creature's numbers have been reduced to safe levels, then it's time to start using the new Razors to take some of them alive. And this strat ends up working really well. We thankfully don't lose anybody this time, and we do still get some Pandorans to add to our captured specimens. So yeah, lesson learned. Greed is the enemy. And from here, the game's story kind of stops. At least for a while. There's not really anything we can do to be proactive about finishing the game. We just have to wait for the Pandorans and the other factions to complete certain research so that we can advance to the final mission. And seeing as we're stuck, we might as well use our time productively. And so that's going to involve becoming as ridiculously powerful as we can possibly be. I have a feeling we're going to need it before all is said and done. So to help us with this, we unlock both bionic and mutant upgrades. Now we can use these to alter our soldiers' bodies, giving them useful enhancements. We haven't unlocked all of them just yet, but we do have the best one. For our assault heavy combos, we're giving them the Vengeance Torso. This makes their melee attacks cost only 1 action point instead of 2. And combining this with the rapid clearance perk they gain at level 7 is extremely powerful. Essentially, rapid clearance refunds 2 action points for every elimination the soldier makes. So you can probably do the maths there. 1 action point to attack, 2 action points refunded. I believe the community refers to this as the Terminator Build, and it is notoriously overpowered. Combine it with Frenzy and you've got units who can potentially clear an entire map in a single turn. So let's try it out with Sophia here. We've got another Legacy of the Ancients mission where we have to steal the final schematic. This one is against the Forsaken, a faction consisting entirely of mutants. Now this one can be pretty tricky depending on what units spawn and where they spawn, and so I deliberately held off on doing it until after we had access to the Vengeance Torso. I figured it may come in helpful. And I'll take you back to Past Drifter to demonstrate this unstoppable power. We activate Rapid Clearance. So now every time she kills a guy, she's going to get 2 action points back. Her melee attacks only require 1 action point. So this is going to be just the most broken that you've ever seen in your life. Unless she gets paralyzed. Oh, okay, well played. Well, that was anticlimactic. Well, we've discovered the one weakness of this strat, it seems. It's only going to work providing we keep scoring eliminations. So yeah, that was a bit underwhelming, I'll give you that, but the potential is there. I promise. Just trust me, okay? Now, the other drawback for this strat is that mechanical body parts cannot be healed by traditional methods, meaning medikits. So we may need to spend some supplies to repair them if any of our soldiers take damage on a mission. As for the mutations, I have some ideas in mind for these too, and these actually cost mutagens to purchase. Now, mutagens are what we can extract from our live Pandoran specimens once we have the right research. And just like the bionic upgrades, there are multiple upgrades for the mutants. Now, again, just like the bionics, we don't have all of these things unlocked, but we do have the priest heads, and the judgment head is the one we want. It essentially serves the same purpose as Jacob's helmet. It will provide the priest a buff to their will points, and it will give them the frenzy ability. So this way, we'll be able to give all of our teams access to frenzy. That's going to make a big difference. Now, my plan is to cross-class the priests with the technician role. Technicians have a lot of useful healing abilities, so the priest-technician bros will be essentially support units. If we can get one with the close quarters specialist ability, that would also allow them to wield a melee weapon for self-defense if things go sideways, so that's why I'm hanging out for that. But even without that skill, these guys can still use a new razor, and the technician mechanical arms do have a built-in melee attack as well, although it is kind of situational. And so you can see here our first priest-technician monstrosity, Giggles. And if this image causes any of you to have sleeping problems from now on, you can thank Twitch chat for that. Now, another development you can see here is that Mount Egg has erupted and the behemoth is wandering the earth. Our plan to deal with this thing is to do nothing. Might sound a bit weird, but hear me out. See, I skipped the gift mission entirely since playing it forces us into an air combat tutorial. Now, this tutorial will not allow us to leave until we fire the Manticore's guns, which we obviously don't want to do. So my plan is to just avoid aerial combat altogether. I think the Disciples do have a ramming module that we can attach to our ships, so we could use melee attacks in the sky. Now, I've never used that module, but it honestly sounds like the absolute worst idea in the world. The enemy ships will just pummel us with damage from a distance, while we're desperately trying to get into ramming range. I just don't see it happening. So instead, we're going to pick our battles, and we're going to allow the behemoth to rule the skies, uncontested. We'll focus on our ground game, and eventually we should be able to take the big boy down for good. He's just going to cause a great deal of destruction to the Havens in the meantime. But honestly, that's the Havens' problem. And even though we're not going to engage in aerial combat, with the behemoth out and about, we do unlock the aerial research. And the main one I want are the hibernation pods. These refill our soldiers' stamina while we're aboard the Manticore, so with these installed, we shouldn't ever have to return to the base to rest up, and that should be really helpful. We've soon got another Cedriion Haven defense, but now the Pandorans are fielding both Sirens and Chirons, so they're definitely leveling up. And whenever we find new specimens like this, we want to take them alive if we can. It gives us extra research to, research. And the Chirons in particular take a lot of paralysis damage to shut down. But the thing with paralysis is it's cumulative. So paralyzing a unit completely will take away all 4 of its action points. Inflicting half of their maximum paralysis damage will take away 2 action points, etc., etc. And the great thing about this is that even inflicting only a single point of paralysis damage will still remove 1 action point. So we can combine this with Warcry and we can take away 3 actions quite easily. As long as we have the will points to keep using Warcry, we can render these big boys pretty much useless while we fill up the paralysis damage. Then there's another Haven attack, but this one is from the Pure. And look how close we get to intercepting before the Haven gets destroyed. This was a matter of seconds, maybe 1 or 2, just brutal. But don't worry, we are going to deal with the Pure in due time. In the meantime though, we have bigger problems. I'm deploying on our first mission where we face off against the Guardians. Now the lore behind these guys is that they're a leftover relic from a highly advanced civilization and they're guarding the technology of their creators. If we can take them out, the tech that they are protecting will become ours. And it essentially comes in the form of 3 different resources: Mutane, Orichalcum, and Living Crystal. And remember those schematics we picked up earlier? Well, these 3 materials are needed in order to create the weapons that are in those blueprints. Now, the Guardians can be an absolute menace. I remember these things wrecked me the first time I encountered them. Their laser weapons can do huge damage, an easy one-shot if you haven't been investing into the strength stat for your troops. On top of that, the hoplites, which are the little guys, they have shields that they'll deploy pretty much at the end of every single turn. Those things will absorb a heck of a lot of damage. So getting in a firefight with these guys can be rough. And on top of that, they also have immunities or resistances to multiple damage types. And as bad as the hoplites are, they're actually the least of our problems. They'll always be led by a Cyclops on the battlefield. This thing has a lot of health and it buffs the hoplites. On Orichalcum missions, which is what we're doing here, the big guy will give the hoplites the Orichalcum Shield ability. This reduces the damage they take on the next attack by 90%. 90. And not only does this affect Stack, he applies it to the hoplites 3 times per turn. So after 2 turns, these guys are gonna block 90% of the damage for the next 6 hits that they take. It is absolutely bonkers. These guys are so OP. So needless to say, we want to make eliminating that Cyclops our top priority. Every turn it survives, that's more Orichalcum Shield that we're going to have to deal with. And so all of this is probably sounding pretty bad, right? But these guys do have a notable weakness that we can exploit. One that we've exploited from other enemies as well. See, their laser beam, which is by far their most dangerous weapon, it requires 3 action points to fire. So yeah, you can probably guess where this is going. Our usual strat of spamming Warcry every turn is once again gonna save our hides. At least that's my plan. Now the big boy does still have a stomp attack that he can use, but from what I can tell, and I'm not sure about this, but walls seem to stop this attack in its tracks. And given that information, he's really not too dangerous, provided there's a wall nearby. But yeah, we still want to take him down so that he stops supplying that buff to the hoplites. And in addition to their massive amount of HP, the Cyclops actually have quite a bit of armor too. And so we're doing pretty pathetic damage with our melee weapons. It's here though I learned the Ancients are actually susceptible to paralysis damage. I don't think I had ever tried using it on them before. So between Warcry and our new razors, well, just like the Chiron, we can reduce these things to a single action point. And once we do that, of course, there's not too much to worry about. The Hoplites' melee attack does only cost 1 action point, but as long as we're not standing adjacent to any of them at the end of our turn, we're fine. So the priority becomes just making sure we can keep using Warcry. As long as we can hit every enemy with it each turn, it doesn't matter how many stacks of Orichalcum Shield these things have. We can stall them indefinitely and slowly chip away at their HP until the entire stack is depleted, at which point these things are vulnerable to our melee attacks. And it's kind of interesting. I used to be terrified of these ancient boys, but doing a no-guns run forced me to be really aggressive in this deployment. And it turns out, being aggressive, it pays off. You can absolutely wreck these things pretty easily. I'm sure there's a lesson to be learned there about the benefits of conquering one's fears, but I'm just a simple challenge runner, so we'll leave the more philosophical discussions for someone else's YouTube video. Now, we do engage with a few more of these ancient sites. Sophia's team is well and truly up to the task. They're all a cakewalk. Now, like I said, there's 3 resources this DLC introduces, but out of all the ancient items available for manufacturing, we only care about the 2 melee weapons, the mattock and the scythe. Now, these only require the crystal and orichalcum resources, so I'm skipping any mutane levels we find. They are of no benefit to us. That being said, we do still need to control a minimum of 4 sites total. A depository of each resource, so that's 2, plus a harvesting site where we can refine the orichalcum and crystal into a usable state, so that's 2 more, 1 for each resource. And yeah, most of these, they play out the same. The crystal cyclops does provide a different buff to the hoplites than what the orichalcum one does, but the general strat is the same. Just use Warcry and then make sure we stay out of range for their melee attacks. Now, the thing that I had forgotten about this DLC is that in order to harvest the resource, we actually have to keep one of our air vehicles at the site of the depository. And that's honestly pretty annoying. Keeping the Manticore at this location means that we can't be exploring or responding to emergencies like Haven attacks. It's also around this time I replaced Jacob on the A team with plot armor, and of course we've also replaced Irina with Giggles, for better or worse. And while that may seem like a horrifying choice, the truth is snipers just aren't very good for this run. Most of their abilities are pretty useless. Now, we are still going to keep using Jacob and Irina on other squads, just not on the most difficult missions that Sophia's team is going to be taking on. Though to immediately contradict myself on that, I actually send Irina out with a lower level team to one of the ancient sites. We also have 4 heavy assault combos in Pandora, Wayne, Mimic and Glass Cannon, plus we have just a pure assault in Hammer. And this mission definitely proves a lot more problematic. Firstly, we don't have Frenzy. That other priest we have, he's still training up at the base. And that means running around the map like we're Olympic sprinters is just not possible with these guys. So that makes hitting with Warcry while also making sure that we can fall back enough to avoid the melee attacks, well, it's more challenging when our speed is lower. Plus, we get some hoplites activating from a bit of a distance away. This allows one of them to get off a laser shot, and you can see here how devastating these things can be. And our soldiers on this one don't have as much HP as the A team. So if they get hit by 2 lasers in a row before we can heal them, they're pretty much guaranteed to be heading to the Shadow Realm. And the worst part is when Glass Cannon, who ironically is a bulky beast in this game, when he gets hit by one of the lasers, it disables his torso. That means his jet jump ability will no longer work. So for the rest of the mission, he's not going to be able to jump across big distances and then hit a Warcry. So that's definitely a setback. I was relying on him being able to do that. Then we've got Hammer, who doesn't even have melee weapon proficiency yet, so he's just stabbing hoplites with his new razor. And yeah, we may have bitten off more than we can chew here. Pretty much the only thing we have going in our favour is the Living Crystal Cyclops doesn't give the orichalcum shield ability. Instead, the buff that it provides to the hoplites is making their melee attacks stun. Now, given we're trying to avoid the melee attacks, that hopefully won't make any difference to us, at least from a defensive point of view. From an offensive point of view, this is really good news for us. Our soldiers who do have proper melee weapons can inflict far more damage on the hoplites much more quickly than we could on the orichalcum ones. And even though I say these guys are low level, I'm comparing them to the A team there. We do have Pandora rocking the Terminator treatment, and he's even wielding a mattock that we've been able to construct. Now these things do really good damage. The ancient weapons in general are pretty OP, they're a lot of fun to use, and I'm thinking that come the end of the game, I'm hoping that more or less all of our soldiers on the field will have one of their own. And even though we have taken a decent amount of damage and it was a bit scary, the team pulls out the victory, and without any losses on top. So yeah, definitely tougher without the A team, but we still got it done. We have a good amount of mutagens available to us by this stage, so I figure it's probably time we get around to doing the Corrupted Horizons DLC. In this first mission, we're once again fighting Pandorans, and they're not nearly as bad as the Ancients, at least not yet. Plus, we're fielding the A-team, who by now have a couple of mattocks of their own. And this means the basic Tritons and Archons are an easy one-shot for us. Now I am taking the time to paralyze the Pandorans, but only when it's safe to do so. These things are just more free mutagens for us, so we might as well. Now, this particular mission introduces a new enemy type, the Acheron. And these things aren't just the most garbage enemy in the game, they might just be the most garbage enemy in any game. They have large amounts of health and armor, their vulnerable parts are small and hard to hit, they're highly mobile, they have huge amounts of will points, and they can use those will points to summon in reinforcements every single turn. I remember I once had a mission where 2 of these things just sat in the back corner of the map, calling in reinforcements on me endlessly. And the only reason I lost the mission was because my troops literally ran out of ammunition. That's how many Pandorans I'd wiped out. These things are just trash. But there's always a silver lining, right? And one good thing about them calling in reinforcements is that I finally have a chance to show off the Terminator rapid clearance build in all its glory. So enjoy this one, because I sure did.
Never break, always fight, never quit, do it right, play the game, win it life, have no shame, there's no time, feel the pain, live the grind, I could change, in my mind, pick a lane, commit and climb, the only way to win it life, I never miss, that's fact, taking big swings, put your hand to the bat, put me in the ring, you'll go out in a bag, cause I sing what I mean and I bring it to the mad light, ain't got time to kill, I got time to feel, I took the red pill, I know life's short so I wanna live real, but how's it supposed to feel?
Yeah, I guess I shouldn't complain about the Acheron, seeing as we're pretty OP ourselves. But I am going to complain about it. You know what else sucks about Acherons? It takes a huge amount of paralysis damage to shut them down. And you can see here this purple bar filling up on our troops every time they attack the Acheron. This is the corruption mechanic. As our troops' corruption bars fill, they will gain a slight damage boost with their attacks, and while that may sound like a good thing, in exchange it reduces their maximum will points. And if the corruption bar fills up to 100%, it'll remove all of their will points. Now, given how vital will points are, it's overall a huge net negative. And corruption doesn't disappear after a mission. It stays with the soldier and it'll just keep building up. In fact, now that the Acheron has been unleashed, every single mission we deploy on that's inside the Pandoran mist on the strategic layer will inflict corruption damage to our units. Now eventually we will be able to remove corruption permanently, but in the meantime the only way we can get rid of it is by spending mutagens. And that's only temporarily removing it. It will come back if we deploy in the mist or if we encounter more Acherons. And that's why I've been holding off from doing this mission until we had plenty of mutagens available. Or plenty of captured Pandorans at the very least. We need easy access to mutagens to keep those corruption meters low. So we wrap this one up successfully, and now I think I'm ready to get back to the pure. And while these guys can be quite bulky, Sophia with her plus 70 damage Mattock is just too much for them. She wipes out a whole bunch of these metal monstrosities on the first turn alone. On the enemy turn, the main problem doesn't even turn out to be the pure themselves, it's their spider drones. Now I had forgotten how big the blast radius on these things is, and a bunch of them on their turn, they just come from beyond our line of sight and explode right on top of us. Sophia gets hit with 2 blasts, and then one of those obnoxious technicians starts firing on her. Man, I hate those guys. They're so annoying. Now, she does survive, but for a second I was getting pretty stressed that we were about to lose one of our best units. This was way too close of a call. Now, of course, we have our own technician in Giggles, and ours can wield mech arms that can do a few different things, including repairing mechanical units. So I figure this will be perfect for Sophia, but for whatever reason, I'm not able to repair her mechanical parts. I'm not sure if the ability only works on vehicles and not cybernetics, or maybe I was just using it wrong. I'm not sure, but either way, Sophia is out for the rest of the fight. Both her arms have been disabled, and that means she's not going to be able to use any of her weapons. Now, luckily, when I say the rest of the battle, it only takes 1 turn. That means we clear the mission in 2 turns total. We slaughtered most of these goofs on turn 1 with rapid clearance, so there's not too many of them left, and we just mop them up. And once again, I remember really struggling with this mission the first time I played it, but not this time. Terminator Build is just too good, I guess. And with this victory, the pure basically disappear from the game. They won't be attacking any more havens, so that's one less thing that we have to worry about. Everything is coming together, albeit slowly. But there ain't no rest for the wicked, as the Pandorans are attacking one of our living crystal installations. And this is a thing that will happen. The Pandorans are apparently afraid of the Ancients, so they'll try and take down these sites that we control. Now, it's not all bad news though. For this defense mission, we actually have a Cyclops on our side. Yeah, we can build one of these things and place it in the area to assist us in defending from invasions. And this thing is just so cool. Such an awesome feature that we can use this big guy. Now, I'm not going to use his laser since I'm counting that as a gun, but we can use his stomp ability. And it's almost guaranteed to daze any Pandorans caught in the radius. Not to mention how bulky he is, this guy is really useful. It's a shame we can't take him with us everywhere we go. Now, the mission itself ends up taking ages, and we do take some damage, but it's all just because I'm being stupid. I spend an absolute eternity paralyzing the Acherons to take them alive. And of course, as I'm trying to do this, they're spawning in more Pandorans all over the place. And what's even crazier is that one of them seems to completely heal itself of all the paralysis damage that we've inflicted. And of course, using paralysis attacks, well, it's going to take way longer to shut these things down than our regular melee attacks would. And the more attacks we have to make, the more corruption damage we're going to suffer. And on top of all this, what I didn't find out until after the mission is that Acherons don't even give a good amount of mutagens. Like, we can often get more from late game Arthrons that require way less paralysis damage to capture. So yeah, it is just not worth capturing Acherons beyond research purposes. I just need to start slaughtering these things on sight. Our Mattocks can usually wipe them out in 2 or 3 hits, and so that needs to be the approach from now on. I'll stick to capturing the lesser enemies to fulfill our mutagen needs. And almost immediately after that Pandoran attack, they launch another one on one of our Phoenix bases. Now, whenever an invasion is incoming, the game gives us 24 hours of in-game time notice so that we can prepare. So by the time the Pandorans show up, Sophia's team is waiting for them. I move the A-team to the base's entrance, but I keep all of our units just out of line of sight. This causes the Pandorans to run right into us, and we just absolutely abuse them. Getting in
close range
usually works in our favour in this run, and it certainly has here. But check this out. We murk the Acheron and its body blocks off the entranceway. Like, we cannot run past it. The only way we can get by this big thing is to use the mech legs jumping ability to leap over it. And these legs I'm putting on all of our Terminators. It gives them basically a mini version of the jetpack's jump ability, plus these legs provide, I think, +3 speed. So they're making our already super fast Terminators even faster. But yeah, if we didn't have any soldiers with these legs, the game would effectively be soft-locked and the run would be over. There would be no way for us to lose the mission or for the Pandorans to win the mission. It would be a stalemate, minus reloading, of course. So yeah, a bit of a lack of quality assurance on that one. Anyway, there's not too much else to say. We dominate the Pandorans on this one. It's not a problem for us. And I honestly have to say, I am genuinely surprised at just how easy this run is proving to be. Compared to the XCOM 2 run, this has been like a walk in the park. Phoenix Point seems to give the player a lot more non-gun options, and that's certainly making my life easier. But I know some of you, in fact probably most of you, you came here to see the pain. You came here to see me suffer, and I'm gonna give you what you want. I present to you this random scavenger mission. Yeah, it may not sound like much, but, well, it turns out to be pretty brutal. We're fielding a lower level team, but these guys should be pretty decent in their own right. We've got 2 Terminators in Perry and Penguins, plus 2 Assault Berserker combos in Wolf and Cannon F, not to be confused with Cannon Fodder, of course. Plus there's also Jacob, and we have a Priest Technician in Sinpai. I mean, Perry even has a Mattock. I figured we would be fine, but I was wrong. And the issues are twofold. 1, we don't have rapid clearance on anybody. And 2, our stats just aren't as good as the A-team. So these guys cannot move as far, and they don't have as many will points or HP. And on top of all that, these Terminators don't have the extra 20% damage that most of the A-team is sporting from Close Quarters Specialist. And so when we encounter this Acheron, we just cannot reach it and deal damage quickly enough. And as the mission progresses, I'm thinking that we're okay because we are staying on top of the bad guys, and we are closing in on the Acheron. The problem is there are a bunch of reinforcements who have spawned in beyond our line of sight, or at the very least on a part of the map that I wasn't paying attention to. And I don't notice any of these new guys until our turn is just about over. So while I thought we were whittling down the enemy's numbers, they were actually gaining reinforcements from the Acheron and planning a flanking attack the entire time. We're kind of like the orcs in Return of the King when the Ghost Army shows up. We've just been completely caught off guard and we're about to be overwhelmed in record time. And sadly, Sinpai ends up getting taken down by these reinforcements. This causes Penguins to panic, so now we can't use him, and just like that we've gone from 6 soldiers to only 4 who can actually do anything. Now poor Jacob, he doesn't even have enough will points left for a war cry, so it's looking pretty bad. Now I figure it's time to forget about the loot and we just need to make a beeline for the evac zone. Well, everyone except Penguins, that is. Since he's panicked, he's not able to move, and he ends up getting shadow-realmed by a Triton with a shotgun. The chain reaction continues as Penguin's demise now causes Jacob to panic. And at this point I make a massive misplay. I should have just left Jacob to his fate. He's not even that useful of a soldier anymore since I've given his frenzy helmet to plot armor. But, in my cope, I'm thinking maybe if we murk enough Pandorans, we can cause them to start panicking and that will shut them down. Now, it may be a good plan in theory, but the problem is that our troops just don't have the damage output required to pull it off. And so the Pandorans aren't panicking, which means on their turn they are going to massacre us. And I could have evac'd out Wolf, who has some mutations and is far more useful than Jacob, but instead poor Wolf stays to fight and ends up getting ganked as well. On the next turn, Jacob is able to escape, and so he gets to live, getting someone else killed in the process. Someone far more valuable. You suck, Jacob. Cannon F is also able to escape as well, so that's something. And Perry is still alive, but he's way too far from the evac zone, and he ends up getting eliminated before he can get to safety. Just like that, 4 soldiers lost. In that one mission, we lost twice the number of soldiers that we've lost the entire rest of the campaign. So an absolute beatdown here. And it's a reminder to me that I cannot get too cocky. The A team is pretty much unstoppable at this point, but the other 2 squads are not. I need to remember that. And so maybe that's a good reason that we should return to the A team at this point. The Pandorans are now spawning lairs in addition to nests. Lairs are bigger and they have more difficult enemies, but I actually prefer them over the nest missions. The environment is a lot more open, so it's easier to avoid getting lost and actually figure out where we need to go. The objective is to take out the spawnery and then reach the evac. Now the spawnery has a lot of HP, like thousands, but it is completely defenseless. So it's just a matter of removing the enemies that are in our way, and then we can just beat this thing in a pace with our Mattox. It can't do anything to stop us. Anu are happy with us for destroying the lair, and they provide us with another faction quest. This one to basically travel to a Cedriion Haven and just slaughter people left and right. Absolutely ice cold. Now I don't particularly want to do this, but I am going for the Anu ending, so we need to make these guys happy. I guess we don't have a choice. And to make matters even more heartbreaking, immediately after they give us this mission, Cinerron contacts us and offers us a gift, seeing as we're such good friends. I feel like an absolute monster here. That being said, I do still take the gift, because why not? So yeah, then Sophia's team descends upon these innocent people, and we're essentially the bringers of the apocalypse. It's a total stomping. I don't think the Cinerron guys even get to attack us once during the entire mission. And it's actually after we're done that I remembered, if you refuse that Anu mission, they actually offer you a different one instead. One that doesn't involve slaughtering innocent people. So we basically just committed a war crime for no reason. Well, this is awkward. Surprisingly though, Cinerron's attitude towards us only drops by 10, and we quickly have a mission defending one of their havens that bumps it back up to 8. So I guess they actually weren't too worried about that whole spilling innocent blood in the street thing. Cool. Anyway, regardless, the ends do justify the means, as Anu now share their ultimate mutation research with us. This gives us access to the Venom Torso. Now, in a regular run, the Venom Torso is fairly bad. It prevents the soldier from being able to wield two-handed weapons, and that's almost every gun in the game. Assault rifles, heavy cannons, shotguns, etc. But for us, this mutation is actually one of the things that make this challenge even possible to complete. I mean, it's not like we need those two-handed weapons anyway, and a lot of the melee weapons, including the Mattock, are single-handed items, so we can still use those. And the advantage of the Venom Torso is that on that arm that can no longer hold a weapon, a new ability can be used. We can shoot poison spikes from that mutated arm, and this is going to be vital for our success, as the final enemy of the game actually cannot be hit with melee attacks. So this Venom Torso with the Poison Spike ability, along with some other tools that we should be able to use, it's going to come in really clutch. Now, for those people wondering, does the Poison Spike count as a gun? It is a projectile after all. And to answer this question, I'm going to refer to past Drifter from the XCOM 2 No Guns run. Now, I don't know, maybe some Karen might want to count the Psyop's hand as a gun since it is firing a projectile, but look, by that logic, your anus counts as a gun when you're frantically running to the bathroom after the spicy curry you had for dinner. And while it may cause huge amounts of devastation, just like a gun can, I think we can all agree it's not a firearm you're unloading into your toilet bowl. Yep, that seems like sound logic to me. I can't argue with that. So yeah, since it's essentially a bodily function with the mutation, we're not counting it as a gun. Now, the biggest trade-off with this is that since it's a torso mutation, we cannot use both it and the Vengeance Bionic Torso. They are mutually exclusive. Now, my plan is to give the Assault Heavy soldiers the Vengeance Torso, while giving the Assault Berserker soldiers the Venom Torso. It's one of the few ranged attacks we have access to, so we need to put it on somebody. And the Berserkers actually have an ability in their skill tree that can reduce their melee attacks to 1 action point, so they don't need the Vengeance Torso quite as much as the Heavies. And for the uninitiated, what does the Poison Spike actually do? Well, it shoots a spike that inflicts 50 poison damage. And the great thing about poison damage in particular is that it ignores armor. So it doesn't matter how heavily armored the opponent is, the poison spike is always gonna get through for full damage. It also only takes 1 action point to use, which is really good. Now, there is a drawback that it's limited to 16 uses per mission, but that should be plenty, especially if we end up with multiple Berserkers on the team. Anyway, the footage here is actually from a new mission type introduced in the Festering Skies DLC. Sometimes the Behemoth, instead of just damaging a haven, will actually take it over, as in sending a bunch of Pandorans to take over the place, and will encounter multiple faction soldiers being controlled by Mindfraggers. Now, at first, my plan is to take things slow and steady, but after spotting an Acheron across the map, that instantly goes out the window. And using the Poison Spike here isn't a strategic move, I'm just testing it out since it's the first time I've ever used it. Once the big boy is gone, I start using the new razor on the Myrmidon. This particular variant is a poison Myrmidon. There's also acid Myrmidons as well. And these obnoxious little things will actually explode when we take them out. So we really don't want to finish them off at
close range.
We'll take a heap of damage if we do. So while the new razor may take a bit longer, shutting them down with paralysis is a safer option than outright destroying them with a melee hit. As for the controlled Anu soldiers, we just hang back behind cover and we force them to move up on us. Once they're close enough, on our turn we can run in and we can use our bash attacks to remove the Mindfraggers. And once we do this, we actually get control of the Anu soldiers and they will join us for the rest of the fight. And interestingly here, the Mattock seems to take far more damage from a bash than the non-ancient melee weapons. I guess they made the ancient weapons more fragile as a balance thing, they're more easily destroyed than regular weapons. I'm not sure. Now, our objective is to eliminate the Lovecraftian abomination inside this large building. There's a couple of problems though. Firstly, it's covered in eggs, and the creature inside can cause a mass hatch. And these eggs are actually worse than the ones on the Nest mission, since some of them can contain Myrmidons. Thankfully here we actually get quite lucky, and the majority of the eggs seem to just be Mindfraggers and worms, and neither of those things are too threatening by this point in the game. Now, as for the creature inside the structure, it's known as a corruption node. It's the thing controlling the Pandorans in the Haven. The nodes have a massive AoE attack that can absolutely wreck anyone who gets caught in it. So the best bet with these things is usually to run in, make an attack or two, and then run back out to a safe distance. The node cannot move, so as long as our soldiers are outside the AoE, we should be fine. However, the problem with this particular level is that there's not an easy way in and out of the room housing the node. So I'm thinking once we run in, we're not going to be able to easily get back out using only a single action. I try lobbing some grenades to make a hole in the wall that we can use as an improvised exit, but they're just too thick and the grenades aren't doing anything. So that's not going to happen. And this leaves us with only one option. The mother of all alpha strikes. We have to move in and destroy this thing's gigantic HP pool in a single turn. So here it is, and yeah, it's pretty horrifying, isn't it? Now at first I consider trying to paralyze it. I've never done that to a node before, so I'm not sure what would happen. But it quickly becomes apparent we will not be able to inflict enough paralysis damage in one turn to shut this thing down, so instead we just need to start swinging those mattocks. And you can see here, even though it has a great deal of HP, Sophia absolutely shreds it in a couple of hits. Yeah, this was much easier than I expected. And for the third time now, this is another scenario that I used to be really intimidated by, but it's proven quite easy to handle in this run. Mattocks are just really good. And it's really great that this mission is complete, since the node autopsy research is the next piece of the puzzle that we've been waiting for in order to take on the behemoth directly. And we've kind of run out of things to research by this stage, so we're obviously going to make this one a priority. While that's happening, the Pandorans decide to launch another attack on one of our Phoenix bases, but they make a little bit of a misplay here. See, the base they decide to assault is the one housing all the training facilities, and literally every single recruit we've picked up so far who isn't assigned to a Manticore. Plus, Jacob and Kenan F's new team is also stationed here. They took on some low-level soldiers to refill their ranks, so I was leaving them at the base to level up a bit before sending them back into the field. And inside this facility, we're actually rocking 20 soldiers. And we would have had the Aspida on top of that, but I didn't repair the base's vehicle bay, so unfortunately it wasn't available. But yeah, I don't think we'll need it. I think 20 guys and girls can handle this. I mean, it's to the point where I'm actually having to build weapons before the attack, since we have more troops than weapons they can use. I think one or two of them just end up with a rifle for bash attacks because we just don't have anything else to give them. And while it is true quite a few of these guys are fairly low level, this scenario is kind of like that song by The Music, Strength in Numbers. Did anyone play that game Pure back in the Xbox 360 days? Man, I loved that game. Anyway, back on topic. There is something else to note here. Not every soldier is low level. Some of them are just about maximum level, in fact. And those troops include our new friends here, the Mutoids. We obtained access to these guys with some research after the first Acheron encounter. They're part of the Corrupted Horizons DLC. And they're essentially life forms that are grown from mutagens. And they are a lot of fun to play with. Their skill tree is totally different from the other classes. These guys can actually choose one ability from each class at each level, only up to level 6. And in addition to that, they can also choose one Pandoran ability at each level. And there's a few implications here. One, we can give them the Deploy Decoy ability from the Infiltrator skill tree. Now, Infiltrators are pretty much a useless class for this run, and yes, I am counting their crossbows as guns, but they do get access to this one perk in particular that could be helpful, Deploy Decoy. It's essentially Phoenix Point's version of the Mimic Beacon, but it's an ability, not an item. So with our Mutoids, we can take this Infiltrator ability while ignoring all the other skills in the Infiltrator tree. Then we can take more useful skills like Dash and Melee proficiency. As for the Pandoran abilities, I'm taking Launch Fireworm to start with. This gives us a similar ability to the Chirons. We can launch fireworms, as you might expect. I'm also going with Siphon Attack and Regeneration, both of these things for healing. Medikits cannot heal our mutoids like they can human soldiers, so the healing abilities I like to have just in case things go sideways. And then perhaps the most important skill of all, Spit Poison. Similar to the Venom Torso, this gives our mutoids a projectile poison attack, which I'm thinking is going to be invaluable against the game's final boss. And just like the Berserkers, seeing as the fireworms and the poison spit are projected from the mutoid's body, we're not counting those things as guns. And finally, one other mechanic with the mutoids is that while they do need XP to level up like a normal soldier, they do not use it to improve their stats or to purchase abilities. Instead, that's all done using mutagens. So as long as we have the mutagens available, and it does cost a lot, we can fully upgrade these guys to maximum stats and abilities before they've seen even a single mission of action. And this is another reason I've been collecting live Pandorans all this time. I knew we were going to need a lot of mutagens for these guys. I think it's around 700 to fully upgrade just one mutoid, so not cheap. I've trained up 4 of these things and all of them are assisting in the base defense. And really, there's not much to say about the mission itself. We just overwhelm the Pandorans with sheer numbers. And it's especially satisfying because there's an Acheron on this one. Spamming huge numbers of units is the main strat of these things, so getting to use its own tactics against it, well, that brings a tangible sense of joy to my otherwise cold, dead heart. Have I mentioned I don't like Acherons? We soon construct a masked manticore, and this is significant for a few reasons. Firstly, it will allow us to attack the behemoth directly and destroy it for good. Secondly, it's a 4th air vehicle, so we'll be able to field 4 squads instead of 3. That's always nice. And finally, it can house 8 units rather than the 6 of the regular manticore. So on our A team, Giggles is swapped out for a new Tech Priest combo in Knights. Knights has the Close Quarters Specialist perk, so he's just a straight upgrade over Giggles. Captain is then replaced with another Assault Berserker in Crabboy Deleter, and I also add 2 of our mutoids to the team to fill up those extra 2 slots. So with 4 squads now, Jacob is back leading a Haven defense, and I mean, it's Jacob. You can probably guess how this one's gonna go. A couple of things go wrong here. One is that the Pandorans have an absurd amount of paralyzing attacks. So immediately our Assault Iliev takes some paralysis damage. That, of course, reduces their action points. The second problem is I send Bomani here out to attack an Acheron, which separates them from the rest of the squad. Now they're a Terminator, so I figure they can handle being on their own, and taking down the Acheron quickly is worth the risk. But I end up immediately regretting this decision as a Myrmidon drops down from the roof above and just Shadow Realms Bomani straight away. So he's gone, just like that. And I had literally just upgraded this guy to a Terminator before we deployed on the mission. Waste of resources that was. Myrmidons are brutal. Now, I had been sending Iliev and Aruda, a priest technician, to back up Bomani. They were just moving a bit slower. But with our Terminator gone, the Myrmidon that finished him still hanging around, and the Acheron still calling in reinforcements, I figure the duo just need to retreat as fast as possible. Problem is, when someone is paralyzed, retreating becomes kind of difficult since the enemies move faster than they do. So Iliev soon gets taken out as well. Aruda desperately hurries down the alleyway to meet up with the rest of the squad, but it's honestly not looking good. And speaking of the rest of the squad, how's it going for them? Well, pretty horrible to be honest. We found ourselves in this open area with quite little cover, and everyone's taking paralysis damage just everywhere, so relocating to a better position isn't really an option. Even if we fall back, the same thing that happened to Iliev is going to happen to everyone else. The Pandorans aren't paralyzed, so they will quickly catch up to us and eradicate us. We're making our final stand in this trash little town square thing, for better or worse. Now we do have a mutoid and it has the rip-off mimic beacon ability, so we can use that to buy us some time. The problem is it's not as good as the XCOM 2 version. The Pandorans aren't guaranteed to attack it. They just treat it like any other soldier. They might attack it, they might not. So in this instance, the beacon only distracts one Arthron for us, but one is still better than none. Now we had also deployed a fireworm with the mutoid earlier. It serves as another distraction to the Myrmidon and Triton chasing down Aruda. The worm is sacrificed so that our priest can successfully reach the rest of the team. Not that I think it's going to do him much good. The team is in a really bad situation. They're still getting swarmed. That Acheron is behind the building somewhere, and it's no doubt summoning in reinforcements every single turn. So the Pandorans are just going to keep on coming, and they're basically attacking from 3 different directions, so taking cover is kind of impossible. Now at this point, we need another distraction for that Myrmidon and Triton following Aruda. Our options are limited, but they're not zero. See, we have made contact with some of the civilians in one of the buildings. Now you may ask the question, and the answer is yes. The whole point of the mission is to protect the civilians. But if we were to send just one into that alleyway, that would probably buy us another turn before those enemies catch up with Aruda. So if this one brave civilian makes a noble sacrifice, it may help save the entire haven in the long run. That's a worthwhile exchange, isn't it? Yep, bye Civ, you've got a one-way ticket to the Shadow Realm. Now, to be fair, there is a new Jericho heavy who could be helping us in this fight, but instead she's just running around uselessly on the very edge of the map, leaving us to our fate. So if these guys don't want to help us, well, we can play that game too. I'll find somebody who can help us. And placing that civilian in the alleyway, it actually pays off huge. For us, I mean, not the civilian. He's deader than the chances of a Concord sequel. But see, multiple Pandorans cluster around him to attack, and that gives us the opportunity on our next turn to throw an incendiary grenade their way. I had actually expected to use these firebombs a lot more during this run, as fire damage can be devastating in this game. But the truth is, we really haven't needed them. However, I was certainly glad to have one stashed away for this encounter. It's come in super useful. Now with Aruda joining the rest of the squad, we can start using his technician abilities to heal up our damaged troops. He can even reduce their paralysis damage, which is going to give us more action points back, so that's really nice. However, healing our soldiers isn't going to get rid of their Pandorans. We need to be attacking to do that. And there's this Arthron shield bearer who has taken up the perfect position to counter us. It's inside this little building, but the window is actually 1 tile wide, and we cannot finish our movement on that tile. So we cannot get into the building to attack this thing. Then on its turn, the shield bearer is going to be able to climb through the window and come for us. And no doubt it'll be able to reach deep into our lines. This is actually a really big-brained play from the game here. I'm really impressed. In fact, I'm so impressed that I think I'm going to use this strategy for myself. See, our mutoid can deploy a worm right on the other side of the window, and that's going to cut off the Arthron's access to the outside the same way that it's cutting off our access to the inside. So the shield boy ends up having to run around the long way, and it's only able to hit the worm itself. The rest of our squad is safe. Meanwhile, the sniper who helped take down Ilyev has had all of its arms crippled by that fire grenade, so it's essentially helpless for the rest of the fight, and the Myrmidon seems to have been consumed by the flames too. I don't think it shows up again for the rest of the mission. Something else working in our favour is Cannon F's Venom Torso. Since the Venom shot is only a single action point, even when paralysed, we can still make multiple attacks. We're also deploying more worms with the Mutoid to use as meat shields, just anything that we can to prevent our troops from taking more damage. And somehow, to my great surprise, we actually hold the line. The Pandorans are pushed out of the town square, and we can then finally start taking cover in this nearby building. And that's going to hugely reduce the Pandorans' ability to flank us. This puts us in a much better position, figuratively and literally. We get sight of the Acheron and we're finally able to annihilate it. And yeah, just an absurd encounter here. Probably the most epic of the campaign so far. And if it wasn't for that one Myrmidon on the roof above Bermani, I actually think this would have been a pretty easy fight. Instead, here I am in disbelief that we even survived. Well, we mostly survived. We have taken 2 more losses, so that's taking our total for the run up to 8, I think. And I realise at this moment what I should have been doing the entire time. Just leave these guys at the training facilities until their maximum level. I thought they were ready for the field, and the more units we have spread across the globe, the better that we can defend the havens from Pandoran attacks. But it's just not worth losing soldiers. Some of these havens are just going to have to defend themselves while we level our troops up to a sufficient power level. Meanwhile, our 8-unit Alpha Squad sets out on the final mission of the Corrupted Horizons DLC. It's pretty much just a standard lair mission, maybe a little bit anticlimactic, but it does have the twist that there are some Cedriion soldiers here as well. And just like with the Haven missions, we can make contact with these guys on the field and take control of them. And there's honestly not much to say about the mission itself. It goes fine. But the great thing about completing it is the corruption mechanic is now effectively gone. Beating this level allows the Phoenix Project to develop a cure to the Pandoran corruption. Now we do still have to use mutagens to heal the corruption from the soldiers who currently have it, but after that they'll never get any more again. We'll never have to worry about corruption damage for the rest of the game. So that's going to make things a bit easier for us. And with the corruption gone, I think it's also time to wrap up the Festering Skies DLC. Only the masked Manticore is capable of approaching the behemoth, so we head in with the A-Team. And this battle is going to take place on the back of the giant monstrosity itself. It's a very cool level. Now the biggest problem we have is that our squad gets split in half, 2 lots of 4. Now that in of itself would be okay, but we don't actually get to choose how the team is split. My biggest fear heading into this is that both our frenzy users will be deployed together, and that'll leave the other half of the team with no frenzy users. So yeah, you can probably guess what happens. Plot Armor and Knights, both of our frenzy users, they end up on the same half of the map. This game may not be XCOM baby, but sometimes it sure does feel like it. Now Sophia and Rookie are also with the pair, and these 4 have deployed on what I generally consider the easier side of the map. That means on the more difficult side we have Takeshi, Delita, and the 2 Mutoids. And having the Mutoids together here is honestly pretty horrible. I've mostly built them as support units. When it comes to strictly offense, they're not particularly good. So this squad composition is just not working in our favour. Now what makes this side of the map more difficult? The biggest thing is that it tends to spawn stronger enemies, like Chiron and multiple Myrmidons in this particular instance. So I do the only thing I can think of with the Mutoids, and we start spamming some fireworms. And just look at this. These worms deploy absolutely nowhere near where I'm clicking with the mouse. One of them even gets destroyed because it just flies off into some rocks. Now, apparently it's the high winds of the map, but the game says the effect of this is that the range of thrown objects is halved. This doesn't look like it's halving them, it's just causing them to go off in a totally different direction. Plus, these kinds of shenanigans seem to happen on regular maps as well, admittedly not to the same extent. But yeah, it is pretty frustrating. The other thing to be aware of is the two sides of the map don't actually connect, so there is no way to regroup the entire team together. We're stuck with our mutoids and fireworms here. Now, the one thing working in our favour is that Takeshi is wielding our first scyther. I might have called this thing a scythe earlier on, but no, it's actually named a scyther, just like the Pokemon. And this thing does even more damage than the Mattock, plus it's an AoE attack, so it's pretty beastly, and Takeshi is making good use of rapid clearance. Now, the Myrmidons are still a problem. Even if we use the Scyther, the flying boy is going to explode on us. And with the AoE, I'm not actually sure if it's big enough that we can attack to inflict damage while still avoiding the Myrmidon explosion. I don't think we can. So we're just using the usual war cry and paralysis strats to slow this thing down. And then check this one out. We send a worm to explode on one of the Chiron's worms, and even though the game is clearly telling me the enemy worm will be caught in the blast, of course it survives and it seems to take no damage at all. So we send a second worm to the exact same position the first one was at, and then the enemy worm uses its turn to explode on us, and you guessed it, we get caught in the blast and taken out. That's annoying. There's also these vent type of things, I think they're called gills. Every few turns the behemoth will do a stomp attack and daze pretty much our entire team. Destroying these gills will slow down the frequency of the stomps. Now, one of these things we're able to land a melee attack on and we can get rid of it pretty easily, so that's good. But then the other one, for whatever reason, it does not have an option to melee. So I try throwing a firebomb at it and it does basically nothing. Apparently the gills cannot be set on fire. And yeah, all the nonsense and the inconsistency in this mission, it's kind of peak Phoenix Point. We're fighting this epic battle on the back of a mountain-sized monstrosity. It's such a cool concept, but the execution is just kinda lacking a little bit. Great idea in theory, the game can't always pull it off. Now, Takeshi's side is getting hit by another Myrmidon, and I decide there's no better option, we just need to pulverize it and take the explosive damage. We're getting overwhelmed here, and we need to start getting rid of some of these enemies. Now, the damage from the explosion itself isn't too bad, but it does cripple one of Takeshi's legs, and that's going to slow him down. Given he currently has no access to Frenzy, he's not going to be moving very fast, and rapid clearance just became a lot less reliable. Now, we do get hit by a behemoth stomp, but our two berserkers with their mutant heads, they're actually immune to daze. So I'm getting a bit desperate and I use our poison spike attack on the remaining poison Myrmidon. Now, I expected the Myrmidon to be immune or at least resistant to poison damage. For obvious reasons, it's in the name, but it turns out it's not. The spike actually wrecks this thing pretty nicely, so I should have just done that from the start. Meanwhile, Sophia's side of the map is actually doing quite well, and we can begin work on the objective to win the mission. We have to inject 4 loads of virophage poison into the behemoth at 4 specified locations. 2 of them are on the easy side of the map, 2 of them on the more difficult side. Now, it takes an age, but we eventually finish the Chiron, so that thankfully means no more worms dropping in on us. There are also eggs on the behemoth's back, but these ones aren't like the other eggs we've encountered. There's no Pandorans emerging from these. Instead, they just explode on us if we get too close. And my goodness, do they do an absurd amount of damage. one of our mutoids gets hit in a blast and it takes almost all his health. And even though he just survives with 38 out of 350 HP, he's also taken 60 bleed damage. So we need to evac him out this turn, otherwise he's finished. And that's a lot of mutagens to replace him, so I'd prefer to keep him alive if we can. On his way out, he does launch one last worm before evacing, just doing whatever he can to help the team. But yeah, we're now down to 3 soldiers on the difficult side of the map, and one of them has a crippled leg. This is not looking good at all. Now the thing about the virophage injection is that it takes several turns to finish, and the soldier who's doing it is essentially defenseless while it's happening, and that's going to take multiple turns. And of course, the injection sites are in pretty open terrain on the difficult side. That's one of the other things that makes it difficult. And we have a bit of a problem. As we're trying to inject the virophage, a new acid myrmidon has arrived as backup, and it's hiding behind this growth structure. We just do not have an easy way to get to it and finish it off. Meanwhile, on its turn, it's going to be able to fly over that barrier and attack anyone it likes. And these things can be absolutely horrific when they explode on a soldier. Like, I once had a guy take 400 points of acid damage from the explosion. It is just insane. So we're just throwing fireworms at the Myrmidon with the remaining mutoid, and we're just trying to use them as meat shields. Now the strat does work for a turn or two, but then it doesn't. The Myrmidon eventually decides to ignore the worms, and it comes for Deleter as he's activating the virophage. Now the worms have inflicted some fire damage as well as some bleed damage on the Myrmidon, and while that may sound good in theory, it's actually terrible for us here. See, when this thing explodes on Deleter, he's going straight to the Shadow Realm, and there's really nothing we can do to stop it. We can't move him away, he's stuck in place because of the virophage, and even if we could paralyze the Myrmidon, it's going to hit 0 HP on the next turn due to the damage over time. So it's going to explode on Deleter one way or another. There is nothing we can do to help this guy, and he is finished. Unless the virophage injection completes on this very turn, and that ends the mission before the Myrmidon can explode. This was literally the skin of our teeth. Absolutely clutch save there. So everyone survives, if only barely. And honestly, the most annoying part of this mission is that I think it would be much easier if we could choose who deployed where. So it's kind of an artificial difficulty here. But hey, it keeps things interesting, so I guess I can't complain from that perspective. And there is an important takeaway that I thought I'd mention here. We just defeated the behemoth without engaging in a single air battle. So assuming we win the campaign, I've just demonstrated that you can actually win the game without any air combat whatsoever. So if you don't like the aerial dogfights, well, 1, I don't blame you, but 2, you can totally ignore them and still beat the game, at least on veteran difficulty. So kind of a bonus challenge run we've completed here, beating Festering Skies without engaging in aerial combat. That's pretty cool. And I do actually want to correct something I said earlier in the video. In terms of finishing the game and waiting for the AI to complete the research we need, there is actually a way we can speed up this process. Once we're allied with a faction, we can complete research projects for them, and our research times are way faster than Anu's. Like this project that's going to take them 6 days to complete, it only takes us 1. So we can unlock the Anu final mission in a pretty reasonable time. And if you are trying to complete the game as quickly as possible, just work on becoming allied with one of the factions as fast as you can. From there, you can actually finish their necessary research for them. And yeah, speaking of that final mission, I think it's just about time we do that. Like I said earlier, we're going with the Anu ending, and I'm doing this purely because it provides an extra soldier on the final mission, so we'll be able to field a team of 10 rather than the usual 9 that we would have with any of the other endings. And before we deploy, I figure now is the time to burn through our massive amount of communal soldier points. I'm thinking we have plenty of them, but I get a bit of a surprise when it takes half of our points to level knights up to maximum. Yeah, half on one soldier. So they're not going to go as far as I thought, and it does leave us with a shortage of points for Deleter and Plot Armor. I'm not going to be able to give them every ability that I want to. So I just level these guys up as much as possible and I call it a day. Now yes, we could go out on a bunch of missions to farm more SP, but that's going to be a really time-consuming process, and this run has taken long enough as is. So we're just going in with what we have, hopefully it'll be enough. We send in Sophia's team of 8, but very randomly, we can actually deploy 9 soldiers. And I don't think the game has an air vehicle that can actually house 9 troops, so I have no idea where the developers got that number from. But whatever, we can send in a second Manticore and we can take a soldier from one of the other teams, and I opt for one of our mutoids. So that gives us our 9, and like I said, on top of that, we also have this big beast, the leader of the Anu faction, the Exalted herself. She's going to join us on this one. And it's kind of crazy that our priest actually has more will points than she does. Didn't expect that, but it's kind of cool. Now, the first part of this mission requires us to work our way to the final boss before we can fight it. And of course, there is a legion of Pandorans between us and that encounter. We begin by using the mutoids to deploy a barrage of fireworms. As far as I'm aware, the only limit we have on how many of these creatures we can create is whatever number will cause my PC to crash. So I imagine we're going to be able to have a lot of these things. There is a problem though that, like I said, the worms often don't land anywhere close to the indicated position. So we can potentially lose worms that way, and we do. But the good thing is, if we lose any, there's no time limit on this mission, so we can always just make more worms on the next turn. Worst it's going to do is slow us down. Now we can frenzy the worms, but even with that movement buff, they're still really slow. And then you'll see this absolute menace here, a Scylla, at least I think that's how you pronounce it. It's pretty much the strongest unit in the game. It has over 4,000 HP, and it's got a melee attack that will absolutely shred our units. It can also deploy mind fraggers every turn. And as if this thing wasn't bad enough, it actually gets worse since it's accompanied by 2 Acherons. And I'm really concerned these Acherons are just going to sit back and call in a metric ton of reinforcements before our worms can do anything to shut them down. So before we send in the worms, Sophia needs to charge into the front line of the enemies. Her job is simple: eliminate the 2 Acherons while staying out of reach of the Scylla. So of course we're going to use rapid clearance to do this, and one-shotting some of the weaker enemies can help Sophia chain enough movement actions together that she's able to reach the Acherons and dispose of them. We can also use the Onslaught ability with some of our other assaults, and that can give Sophia some extra action points. Using these, she can easily outrun the Scylla after she's taken care of the Acherons. And from here, my plan is to then deploy the Worm army, and we can use the fire damage to wreak havoc on the Scylla's HP. Unfortunately, the Pandorans have a bit of a secret weapon of their own: goo. Yeah, maybe not what you were expecting. Or maybe it was. But the Scylla, as well as some Chirons, are launching goo at us. Now the good news is this doesn't hurt our HP, but it will lock our units in place for about 3 turns. There is a module you can build for your troops' footwear that makes them immune to goo, but we weren't actually able to unlock the research for it during the campaign. We didn't meet the requirements. And even if we had, the worms don't have footwear, so it wouldn't help them anyway. and I really want those things to be forming our front line. Now there is also another Chiron that's not throwing goo, it's launching poison worms at us. And the way this level is structured, there's a giant wall in front of where we deploy. So I think the intention is that it allows Chirons to rain fire down on us without our troops having the ability to shoot back at them. And in a regular playthrough that would probably be a bad thing. But it does have some advantages too. See, we can hang back quite a distance from that wall with our troops, and the goo will actually block the Pandorans from reaching us. They can't cross it either. So as long as we can deal with the worms falling out of the sky, we're not actually in too much danger. The other thing we can do is throw worms of our own onto the Pandoran side of the goo. And yes, the Scylla can crush them quite easily, but our plan is to just throw down more worms than the Scylla will be able to handle. And we end up in this scenario where the Pandorans have made this area of goo that blocks us, but our fireworms explode, which creates an area of flames blocking them, the Pandorans I mean. Now once the fire is in place around the Scylla, it's not really safe for us to melee attack it anymore. Even running in, just getting off a hit or two and then retreating, it's too risky. Fire damage can stack up really quickly. And I learned in an earlier mission that even using our robot legs to jump over the fire can still result in fire damage. So the flames are way too dangerous, we just want to avoid them completely. And as the fire rages, the fireworms are the only thing that can get close to the Big Mama. They're immune to fire damage, for obvious reasons. However, we do have some things we can use to support the worms. Mainly the Exalted's Induce Panic ability. That can shut the Scylla down for a turn when its will points get too low. And so that means we have a full turn where our worms aren't getting attacked, and that allows us to build up our numbers. Also, the Exalted is immune to goo, so that's quite nice to know. And Scyllas were pretty much the sole reason I wanted the Mutoids to have the Fireworm ability. I just figured it was too risky getting into melee these big things, and the worms are great for keeping the rest of our team safe. Now we can also poison the Scylla to whittle down her health faster, but our opportunities to do so are a bit limited. The Mutoids have to be really close for their poison spit to work, and our other soldiers' poison abilities, like the poison spike, they're limited use, and I really want to save those for the final boss. And so this standoff here really becomes a battle of attrition. We're using fire to gradually annihilate the Scylla, and in the meantime, the worms, the panic attack, and even the Mutoids' discount mimic beacon, these are all things that can protect us from the Scylla's counterattacks. And it just becomes a matter of weathering the storm. Kind of feel like I'm playing Frostpunk. See, what I didn't know about Chirons is their projectile attacks are actually limited use. The goo and the worms they can fire will eventually run out, and after that happens, these big boys really aren't much of a threat anymore. And so while it may sound simple, this process takes an absolute eternity. It's over an hour between the mission starting and the Scylla finally meeting its end. Just crazy. But we've managed to deal with the Scylla while avoiding damage for the most part, so I'm definitely not complaining. It took a long time, but our patient strategy was definitely worth it. However, here's something I am going to complain about. After an hour of dealing with the Scylla, we can finally push forward out of the first area of the map, and you can see the Exalted making her way past the Scylla's corpse. But apparently, on the next turn, the game's pathing updates, and now the Exalted is stuck. Like, not only can she not move forward past the corpse, she can't even go back the way she came. She literally cannot move anywhere at all. And this is absolutely dreadful. To win the mission, we need to place the Exalted in front of the final boss. So with this one glitch, that potentially nukes the entire run. And Phoenix Point's autosave is honestly pretty bad. The most recent save we have is back on the strategic layer before the mission even started. That means another hour plus of having to battle the Scylla. There is no way in the world I'm doing that. I'd rather just lose the campaign. So is that it? Is the run over because of jank? Well, thankfully not. With the help of Twitch chat, I'm able to use the teleport console command to move the Exalted to a different location. She's then free to continue moving up with the rest of the team. So crisis has been averted, but yeah, that was way too close a call. It seems no matter where I go, and no matter what game I choose to play, the jank will always follow me. I just cannot get away from it. Now in the next area, there are some Chirons that launch bombs, and these ones are by far the most dangerous. And I remember they wrecked me the first time I played this game. And I was afraid these things would be in the starting section of the map, and if they were, that would have ruined my plan of falling back while dealing with the Scylla, since we'd be taking explosive damage the entire time. Now I did equip all the soldiers I could with blast resistance vests, so that would have helped mitigate the damage, but I still think it would have been bad. So in a way, having goo instead was actually a good thing, since goo doesn't hurt our HP. Anyway, for these Chirons, it's too late. There's no Scylla protecting them, so we can just charge out and obliterate these things before they can do anything to us. And with them gone, it's time for the final boss, the Yugothian Receptacle. And while it may sound like something you'd find at a Diddy party, it presents us some issues when it comes to how we fight this thing. First off, it has the Mark of the Void ability. Now this applies damage to the marked unit every turn, and Yugoth kicks things off by targeting one of our mutoids. On one hand, that's bad since we can't heal this bro with medikits or technician abilities. I did even try the healing grenade, but that doesn't work either. On the other hand, I did make sure to give all the mutoids the ability where they regenerate health every turn. So that's going to mitigate some of the damage that the mark is doing, and our mutoid friend here should be able to tank this damage for quite some time. I have seen other players claim Yugoth will apply the mark every single turn, and the effects will stack if he applies it to the same unit more than once, but here that just doesn't happen. Our mutoid gets marked, and that's it. I don't think Yugoth uses Mark of the Void again for the rest of the battle, and I have no idea why. Maybe it depends on the difficulty level? I'm not sure. Now the Void will also affect any of our units within a 5-tile radius of the afflicted soldier, so we leave our mutoid at the back away from the rest of the troops. The downside is we can't use him in the fight against Yugoth, but I think it's worth it to keep our other soldiers healthy. Plus, the mutoid can still help out by dealing with some of the Pandoran reinforcements that are dropping in. So that leaves Yugoth himself to take down. Now the way this fight works, there's several barriers in front of the big boy, but every turn 2 of those barriers will drop. So there is always an angle to attack him from, but that angle will change each turn. We can't just camp one position and attack every single turn. We are going to have to be repositioning, and that alone does limit the amount of attacks we can make. Now my plan is pretty straightforward. We're going to use poison. Lots and lots of poison. The Berserker's spike attack has 16 uses each. We got 2 Berserkers, so that's 32 attacks. I've equipped the Terminators with 2 poison grenades each, so they can use those. And the Mutons, I think, have unlimited use of poison spit. But again, the range on that is tiny. They have to be right in front of this monstrosity in order for it to connect. And interestingly, Yugoth has a whole bunch of damage resistances, but poison is not one of them. So we can stack on that poison and have it do full damage every turn. Now this boy is bulky. He's got, I think, over 9,000 HP. And I'm sure there's a Dragon Ball Z joke to be made in there somewhere. But after we stack enough poison attacks, we're shredding over 1,000 points off this guy's health every turn. And I think by the end of the fight, we even get it to over 2,000 per turn. And of course, Yugoth was the main reason that I wanted the Poison Spike mutation. It's pretty rubbish in a regular playthrough, but it is a total game changer for this particular run, since our melee weapons cannot hit the big boy. In terms of other attacks, we do also have the Exalted and Knights being able to use their Psychic Scream ability. This is an AoE that does 100 damage to all enemies caught in its radius. And the really good thing about this is that as long as we have the will points required to use it, we can spam this attack multiple times per turn. Now, as far as Yugoth's attacks go, well, there actually aren't any. After applying Mark of the Void once, he just sits there and lets us slaughter him. I'm not sure if the fight bugged out or if this is just what he does, but either way, it is an extremely easy encounter. Like, he does get a few reinforcements to help him, but they're all weaker enemies like Arthrons. We can take them out pretty easily. And the battle with the Scylla was honestly much more difficult than this guy. And the closest we came to ever failing the mission was from a glitch. That's honestly kind of sad. So apologies that it may not be the most climactic final battle in the world, but nonetheless, we are victorious. Yugoth goes down, and then we just have to place the Exalted in the right spot, and it's done. The first time I've ever beaten this game, and I've done it without firing a single gun. That's pretty cool. And I have to say, I had so much fun with this challenge. Phoenix Point is a game that has kind of eluded me on this channel. I honestly think the first playthrough of Phoenix Point that I streamed was pretty bad. I'm not particularly proud of that. Then I made my narrative videos and I just wasn't able to finish the series. And it just seems every time I try playing this game, it just doesn't pan out. Phoenix Point has been my white whale in some ways. But now that I understand the mechanics a lot better, this game has definitely clicked with me. And I had a blast with this run. So who knows, maybe I'll do more Phoenix Point challenge runs in the future. I'm definitely open to that. Let me know in the comments if it's something you'd like to see. Beyond that, I think this video is long enough, so I'm gonna call it a day. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. And you can also sign up to my Patreon for a few bucks a month if you'd like early access to videos like this one. The link to that is in the description. And until next time, have a great day.